Hi there. In this video, let's discuss derived tables. A derived table is a virtual table returned from a select statement. So in simple terms, a derived table is a temporary virtual table. I repeat, temporary virtual table, right? So this virtual table resides within the select statement, right? Which is much simpler, right, than actually creating an actual table, right? So, and also keep in mind, derived table and subqueries are often used interchangeably, but the difference is when you have like a standalone subquery right after the right, from class, um, such select statements is called as derived table. And all the derived tables must have its own alias, which I'm going to explain. So the first example, I'm going to explain a simple example, and then the second example, I'll make it a little complex. By the way, if you haven't watched my previous video where I explained subqueries, please make sure you watch that video, and also joins and aggregates and functions I have touched in my previous videos. So please do watch it before watching this video so it makes sense to you. So let's deep dive into this example here. So this is my complete statement, right? I'll explain step by step, but let's go to the derived table, right? So I'm selecting all columns from. Now this is where the derived table actually starts, right? And it ends right here. So let me explain what I'm doing within this. Let's consider this as like a mini SQL by itself, right? So you'll understand better. So in this SQL, what I'm doing is I'm collecting all the book IDs, and there's complete sales, right? Sales corresponding to that book ID, and also the quantity of the books that got sold. And that's what I'm doing here, right? And I'm grouping by the book ID because that's what I used for reference. So, and then the bracket closes. So that's the end of the derived table, right? Make sure, like I mentioned, make sure you always put an alias after for your derived table, right? Because so you can represent this entire statement using an alias, right? So that's mandatory. And then I'm adding a where clause where the quantity sold is greater than 1, which means I'm only interested in books that got sold more than once, right? And here, if you observe here, the alias that I used in the derived table is what I'm using in here, right? So it's pretty straightforward, right? And this where clause belongs to this select statement, right? Whereas this is your derived table. Okay, so let me explain again. This is the derived table, right? Which is SQL within SQL. You can write whatever you want here, right? And then followed by an alias, which represents the entire derived table SQL that you have written. And then if you choose to, you can add a where clause. You can further group by what not all, but whatever you add after the derived table, that filter will be applied to the display, the displayed information consumed from the derived table, right? So for example, if I execute this by itself, right, the derived table by itself, you can see each and every book ID, the sale, and the quantity that is sold by book ID, right? So that is what this SQL does, right? And then if I execute this whole thing right here, now it only displays the books and corresponding sales of that book and the quantity of the books that got sold, right? Because we used the filter quantity sold greater than 1, right? So once again, this is the derived table. Moving on to the next complex example. Before moving on to this, right? Um, did you see here the SQL above is easy to read? Whereas if you see here, the SQL is not easy to read because some of the content is on the right hand side. So you have to scroll and all that. So if you are going to be a decent SQL developer, you must know how to format your SQL. So that is must. So either you can do it manually, right? Which you should learn at some point. But most tools will give you options to auto format your SQL, right? So you can write your SQL however you like, right? Because you want to make it quick and dirty. Once you have written your SQL, you can right click on it, and then there is an option called Format SQL right here, and just click on the Format SQL option, and it's going to auto format it for you, right? It's pretty easy and straightforward, so I recommend you to use it. So coming back to this derived table here, I'm making it a little complex where I'm in the previous example, I just got all the data from the book sales alone, but here I'm joining book sales with books so I can get a proper book title. And then I'm joining authors, the books with authors, so I can get proper author details as well. And then I added some more functions where I'm collecting the sales by book, and also the minimum sale price and the maximum sale price of that book, and also the quantity sold, right? And uh, the alias is like a mandatory thing. So for the derived table, so I'm just leaving it as is, as like previous example. And also where clause, I'm leaving it as is if I'm only interested in quantity sold greater than one. So let's execute the inner derived table, right? This is derived table statement. When I execute this, you can see all the books, corresponding authors, and the sales, minimum sale for that book, and then maximum sale, because this book is sold only once. So the minimum and maximum are the same. But if you observe for other books, you can see the variation of the sale price here, right? Because you sold more than one quantity, right? So that's what this inner query does. But when it goes to the outer query, which is when you're passing this derived table information to the SQL above it, you can write a filter that you can apply to the derived table, right? So in this case, quantity sold is this. So I'm only interested in quantity book quantity sold greater than one, right? So I'm not interested in this, but I'm only interested in this, right? I'm not interested in this, right? So that being said, if I execute this whole SQL, right? So it's going to be showing only the books and the corresponding authors where the quantity of the books sold are greater than one, right? So that is what derived table is. And you're going to use derived tables in pretty much every job that you are part of, like especially if you're a SQL developer. So make sure you practice and also go on Google and search for more examples and practice more, right? Thank you for watching this video. Take care.